Most people drinking bottled water every single day have no idea what is actually in it. We tested 12 of the biggest water brands sold in America, from the dollar bottle at the checkout counter to a single glass bottle that costs $97. And the results were not what anyone expected. Here is the finding that should stop you cold. In January of 2024, researchers from Columbia University and Rutgers published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences using a new dual laser imaging technique to count something nobody had ever been able to count before: nanoplastics. Particles so small that every previous method missed them entirely. They tested 3 popular brands bought off a shelf at a Walmart. The average liter contained roughly 240,000 plastic fragments. 90% of them were nanoplastics, small enough to cross cell membranes and enter the bloodstream. That is 10 to 100 times higher than every previous estimate. And here is what nobody is telling you. The worst results did not come from the cheap brands. The house brand sold by the grocery chain, with the strictest published ingredient standards in America, tested with 3 times more arsenic than every other brand in the same laboratory round. You are going to recognize the name. We are counting down 9 brands from concerning to genuinely shocking and finishing with the 3 that actually held up. Let us get into it. Before we start, here are the 3 questions we asked of every single bottle, because they are the whole test. Question 1. Where did this water actually come from? A named spring with an address you could drive to, or a municipal tap? Question 2. What is it packaged in? Soft plastic or glass or aluminum, because the study we just described found that much of the plastic was coming from the bottle itself. Question 3. Does the company publish a real mineral analysis and contaminant test with actual numbers, or does it publish adjectives? Pure, crisp, pristine. Those are not measurements. A bottle that answers all 3 has nothing to hide. A bottle that answers none has answered everything. Now here is the countdown. Number 9, Dasani. This is the bottom of our price ladder, roughly $1 at a register and closer to 50 cents a bottle, bought by the case, owned by Coca-Cola. And the first question is the one it cannot survive. Where does it come from? Coca-Cola has never hidden this, though almost nobody reads it. Dasani starts with the local municipal water supply, the same water that comes out of your kitchen faucet. It is then filtered through reverse osmosis, which strips out essentially everything, and then a proprietary blend of minerals is added back in for taste: magnesium sulfate, potassium chloride, salt. Read that sequence again because it is the entire business model. Take tap water, remove what was in it, add a pinch of something back, put it in a soft plastic bottle. Sell it for roughly 1,000 times what it cost. The label says purified water, which is technically true and tells you nothing about the source. To be fair, the purification is real and the product is safe by every federal standard. But you are not buying spring water. You are buying municipal water with a mineral packet and a very good logo in exactly the kind of plastic that shed particles in that Columbia study. The next brand does the same thing and had to be publicly pressured before it would admit it. Number 8, Aquafina. Same price tier as Dasani, right around $1. For years, the single biggest bottled water brand in America wore a blue label with a mountain range on it. Snow-capped peaks, the visual language of a glacier. And the water inside came from public reservoirs. In 2007, after sustained pressure from a group called Corporate Accountability International, which argued the mountain imagery was perpetuating a misconception, PepsiCo agreed to change the label. The bottles had carried the letters PWS. The new labels would spell it out in full. Public water source. A PepsiCo spokeswoman said at the time that if it helped clarify that the water originates from public sources, it was a reasonable thing to do. Sit with the shape of that sentence. A company changed its label to admit the product was tap water and framed the admission as a courtesy. The water goes through a 7-step purification process, and that process is genuine. But the mountain was doing work the water never did. Today, the label is honest. The question is why it took an organized campaign to get there, and how many people bought the mountain for the 14 years before that. The next brand posted the single highest plastic reading of any water ever publicly tested. Number 7, Nestle Pure Life, the cheapest water in this entire test at well under 50 cents a bottle by the case. In March of 2018, a study conducted at the State University of New York at Fredonia for the journalism organization Orb Media tested 259 bottles across 11 of the biggest water brands in 9 countries. 93% of the samples contained microplastics. The global average was 325 particles per liter, and one brand posted a number that stood alone. A sample of Nestle Pure Life contained 10,390 particles in a single liter, the highest reading in the entire study. A federal class action followed in Los Angeles the next month, alleging the company had concealed the truth about the quality of the water. Now here is the honest part, because we hold every claim to the same standard. That study was not peer-reviewed and was never published in a scientific journal, and the bottled water industry attacked it hard. Nestlé tested 6 of its own bottles and reported between 0 and 5 particles per liter, and noted the researchers had skipped a step that removes biological material from the sample. Nestlé was also the only company that agreed to make any of its own testing public. Every other bottler declined. Think about that detail for a second. 11 brands were named. 10 of them responded to a plastic contamination study by saying nothing and showing nothing. The next brand strips the water bare and then charges you extra to put a little back. Number 6, Smart Water. The name is the entire pitch. Smart. Deliberate. Engineered by someone who thought carefully about what your body needs. Owned by Coca-Cola, the same parent company as Dasani, and priced at roughly $2 a liter, about 4 times the Dasani in the next cooler over. And the process is genuinely unusual. The water starts as municipal supply, is purified, and then goes through vapor distillation, a process that mimics the water cycle by turning it to steam and condensing it back. That removes nearly everything, including the naturally occurring minerals and the fluoride. What you are left with is close to blank. Then electrolytes are added back for taste. So the premium you are paying covers a process that takes the minerals out and a second process that puts a smaller chosen set back in. If minerals in water are good, removing them is strange. If they are irrelevant, adding them back is theater. It cannot be both, and the marketing leans on both depending on which sentence you read. To be fair, the water is clean, the taste is consistent, and consistency is exactly what distillation buys. But it arrives in the same soft plastic as the dollar bottle at several times the price, and the intelligence in the name refers to the manufacturing, not to you. The next category charges even more for a claim your own stomach cancels out. Number 5, the alkaline water category, and we will name Essentia as the example because it is the biggest, though nearly every brand in this aisle runs the identical play. The pitch is a number on the bottle, a pH of 9.5, sometimes higher, sold with the promise that it will alkalize your body, neutralize acidity, and improve hydration at a cellular level. Here is the problem. And it is not controversial biology. Your stomach maintains a pH somewhere around 1.5 to 3.5. It is one of the most acidic environments in the natural world, and its entire job is to be that acidic. Alkaline water entering that environment is neutralized almost immediately. Your kidneys and lungs, not your beverage, are what regulate blood pH, and in a healthy person, they hold it in an extremely narrow range no matter what you drink. There is no strong evidence that drinking high pH water meaningfully changes the pH of your blood, and if it did, that would be a medical emergency rather than a wellness outcome. Meanwhile, the water is ionized municipal supply with electrolytes added, sold in soft plastic at about $1.70 a liter, roughly triple the cost of the bottle at number 9. To be fair, it is water, it hydrates, and if you like the taste, that is a real reason to buy it. But you are paying for a number on a label that your own digestive system erases before it reaches your bloodstream. The next brand posted the highest forever chemical reading in a major consumer laboratory test. Number 4, Topo Chico. The cult sparkling water, the glass bottle with the yellow label, beloved in Texas and increasingly everywhere else, owned by Coca-Cola and running close to $2 a bottle. In 2020, Consumer Reports tested 47 bottled waters, 35 still and 12 carbonated, for 4 heavy metals and 30 different per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Those are the forever chemicals, a class of compounds that essentially never break down in the environment or in your body, and that have been linked to learning delays in children and to cancer. Topo Chico registered 9.76 parts per trillion, the highest single reading of any product in the study. For context, the main industry association requires its members to stay below 5 parts per trillion for any single one of these compounds, and some scientists argue the right limit for the total is 1 part per trillion. Now here is the fair part, and it genuinely matters. Coca-Cola responded. The company upgraded its filtration, and when Consumer Reports bought and tested 3 new samples, the average had dropped to 3.9 parts per trillion, less than half the original figure. Consumer Reports noted that this still left Topo Chico among the higher results in the study, but its food policy director said something worth remembering. It demonstrates that bottled water manufacturers are more than capable of reducing consumer exposure significantly. In other words, it was always fixable. It just took a published number to make it happen. The next brand had to recall nearly 2 million bottles. Number 3, Fiji. The square bottle, the hibiscus, the promise, printed on the label that the water was untouched by man, drawn from an artesian aquifer on a remote island in the South Pacific and shipped roughly 7,000 miles to your refrigerator. A liter runs about $2.40 at Whole Foods, and a case of 12 sells for around $23. In March of 2024, the bottler, Natural Waters of VT Limited, pulled 78,533 cases from distribution. That is nearly 1.9 million individual bottles. The Food and Drug Administration published the enforcement report in May. The cause was manganese plus what the agency described as 3 bacterial genera. Manganese is an essential nutrient in small amounts, but the federal guideline holds that bottled drinking water should not exceed 0.05 of a milligram per liter, because chronic overexposure affects the nervous system, and the Centers for Disease Control notes memory, attention, and motor effects. Now, the honest context, because it matters. The agency classified this as a Class 3 recall, its lowest tier, meaning exposure was not likely to cause adverse health consequences. No illnesses were reported. The company said the matter never posed any health or safety risk and that 99% of affected bottles were reclaimed. All of that is true, and all of it belongs in this story, but hold the two ideas together. The brand whose entire identity is that the water was never touched by anyone. And that touches nothing on its journey, recalled 2 million bottles for bacteria and a metal. Untouched is a marketing word. It has never been a laboratory result. The next brand costs $97, and what is inside it is closer to nothing than anything else we tested. Number 2, the polar iceberg water, and we will use Svalbardi as the example because it is the most famous of the ultra-luxury bottles. This is the $97 end of our price range, and depending on where you buy it and which edition, a single 750 milliliter bottle runs anywhere from roughly $95 to $125. The water is harvested from icebergs in the fjords around the Svalbard archipelago, about 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole, gathered by crew on an expedition vessel. The bottle is flint glass with a cap of Arctic driftwood, and here is the part that turns the whole category upside down. That water is almost entirely mineral-free with roughly the pH of fresh snow. Read that again, because in every other context on this list, mineral content is the thing we have been asking for. Total, dissolved solids, calcium, magnesium, potassium. Those are what distinguish a real spring water from filtered municipal supply. This bottle has close to none of them. You are paying nearly $100 for water that is, by the numbers on its own analysis, among the emptiest we tested. What you are actually purchasing is provenance, a story about ice and latitude and a driftwood cap. To be genuinely fair, the glass packaging is right, the sourcing is exactly what the label says, and the company finances carbon reduction projects with every bottle sold, which is more than most brands on this list can claim. But it is the clearest possible proof that in this aisle, price tells you almost nothing about what is in the water. And that brings us to number 1, the bottle that made us question whether any label on any shelf means anything at all. Number 1, Starkey Spring Water. Whole Foods launched this brand in 2015, and it sells for $1.99 a bottle. Hold that number because it is roughly double the gas station bottle at the bottom of this list. Whole Foods built its entire identity around what it refuses to sell, publishing a list of unacceptable ingredients running to hundreds of substances, and every part of that store communicates a single message. Here, the standard is different. Then the laboratory results came back. In 2019, Consumer Reports tested Starkey and found arsenic in 3 samples ranging from 9.48 to 9.86 parts per billion. A 4th sample registered 10.1. The federal limit is 10 parts per billion. The following year, Consumer Reports tested again, along with 45 other brands, and found Starkey at 9.49 to 9.56 parts per billion. It was the only brand of the entire group that exceeded 3 parts per billion, at least 3 times the level of every other water tested. And this was not the first flag. From late 2016 into early 2017, Whole Foods recalled more than 2,000 cases of Starkey after Florida's bottled water regulator measured it at 11.7 parts per billion above the federal ceiling. Consumer Reports has argued for years that the federal limit should be lowered from 10 parts per billion to 3, and its chief scientific officer put the risk plainly. Drinking a single bottle probably will not harm you, but regular consumption of even small amounts of the heavy metal over extended periods increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, certain cancers, and lower scores on childhood cognitive testing. Whole Foods responded that Starkey meets all federal requirements and is fully compliant with standards for heavy metals, and said an accredited third-party lab tests every production run before it is sold. The Food and Drug Administration agreed the products were in compliance. Both of those statements are accurate, and that is exactly the point. This water was legal the entire time. You did everything right. You paid the premium. You chose the store with the reputation for refusing to compromise. You picked the house brand specifically because you trusted what that sign over the door stood for, and it carried arsenic at 3 times the level of the dollar bottle at the gas station. If the retailer that built its entire brand on refusing to compromise cannot keep its own water clean, what does that tell you about everything else on that shelf? Before we get to the 3 that held up, you need to understand the regulatory gap underneath this entire investigation, because it explains everything you just heard. Your tap water is regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency. Bottled water is regulated by the Food and Drug Administration because legally it is a food, not a utility. And the difference in what they demand is enormous. If you are on a municipal system, your utility is legally required to send you an annual water quality report, listing every contaminant detected and at what level. It arrives whether you asked for it or not. Bottled water companies test their product, and many test it well, but there is no equivalent requirement to show you the results. That is why 9 of the 11 brands in that plastic study simply declined to publish anything. They were not breaking a rule. There is no rule. It goes further. By a long-standing estimate from the Natural Resources Defense Council, a majority of the bottled water sold in this country never crosses a state line, and water bottled and sold within the same state falls outside federal bottled water regulation entirely, landing instead under state rules that vary enormously. Carbonated water has historically been exempt from the bottled water standards altogether, and there are still no specific federal rules for microplastics in any food or beverage in the United States, which means the 240,000 particles in that peer-reviewed study are not a violation of anything. They are simply not measured. The system was not designed to catch what we now know how to look for. Now, the 3 that actually held up. Best option number 3, Evian, at roughly $33 a case of 12, so under $3 a bottle, but only in glass, and that qualifier is the entire recommendation. Evian answers question 1 better than almost anything on this list. The source is a specific, protected, named aquifer in the French Alps, where rain and snow melt, filter down through glacial sand over roughly 15 years before it is bottled at the source at Evian-les-Bains. The company publishes a full mineral analysis with real numbers rather than adjectives, and the calcium and magnesium content is meaningful rather than added back at the end. Here is the honest caution, and it is not a small one. Evian was one of the 11 brands in that Orb Media microplastic study, and the plastic bottle is the problem, not the water. That is precisely why this recommendation is conditional. Buy the glass. The source is real, the analysis is published, and the mineral content is genuine, which is 2.5 of our 3 questions answered. The packaging is the only thing standing between this brand and a higher spot on the list, and unlike the source, the packaging is something you get to choose in the store. The next one solved the packaging problem outright. Best option number 2, liquid death. Set aside the skull, the heavy metal branding, and the deliberately absurd name. Because underneath the marketing, this brand made one genuinely important engineering decision. It comes in an aluminum can, not soft plastic. That single choice removes the exact failure mode the Columbia study identified, where fragments of the bottle itself shed into the water when it is squeezed, heated, or opened and closed repeatedly. Aluminum does not do that, and it is infinitely recyclable in a way that a plastic bottle is not. The water itself is real mountain spring water sourced and canned in the Alps, and the company publishes its water analysis rather than hiding behind adjectives. Now, the honest cautions. The can carries an interior lining, so it is not a bare metal container, and this is still a product shipped across an ocean with the carbon cost that implies. At roughly $1.50 to $2 a can, it is not cheap for what it is. But judged strictly against our 3 questions, it names its source, it publishes its numbers, and it solved the packaging problem that nearly every other brand on this list simply ignored. The last one has been doing all 3 since before the telephone. Best option number 1, Mountain Valley Spring Water. This is the most complete answer on the entire list, and it earns it the old-fashioned way. The water comes from a single protected spring in the Ouachita Mountains near Hot Springs, Arkansas, where it has been bottled at the source since 1871. Not a region, not a country, one spring, on land the company owns and has protected for over a century and a half. It has been bottled in glass that entire time. And here is the detail that separates it from everything else we tested. Turn the bottle around and the mineral analysis is printed right there on the label in numbers. Calcium, 74 parts per million. Magnesium, 7.3. Potassium, 1. Total dissolved solids, 220. A pH of 7.8. Nothing is removed and nothing is added back. That is not marketing language. That is a laboratory result printed on a consumer product, which is exactly the standard every brand on the avoid list should be held to, and is not. The water is naturally sodium-free, and the mineral content is real, rather than reconstituted from a packet after distillation stripped it out. The honest trade-offs. Glass is heavy, it costs more to ship, and the price reflects that. At roughly $2 to $3 a glass bottle, it is not the cheapest water in the store, and it never has been. But it answers all 3 of our questions completely, which no other brand we tested managed to do. Name source with an address, glass packaging, publish numbers on the label. Before you close this, here is the one rule worth keeping, and it removes almost every brand on the avoid list from your cart with no research required. Stop buying water in soft plastic. That single change addresses the single largest finding in this entire investigation because much of the plastic in that peer-reviewed study was coming from the bottle itself and from the filters used in processing, not from the original water. Glass, aluminum, or stainless steel, that is the whole rule. Second, if you are going to keep buying bottled, turn the bottle around and look for actual numbers. A Real Spring Water publishes its mineral analysis, its total dissolved solids, and its pH, because it has something to show you. A purified municipal product publishes adjectives, because a number would give the game away. Third, understand that mineral-free is not the same as better. The emptiest water we tested cost nearly $100 a bottle, and the most complete one prints its calcium content on the label for a few dollars. Purity, in the marketing sense, often just means everything was stripped out. Fourth, never leave a plastic bottle in a hot car and stop reusing single-use bottles, because heat, and repeated squeezing and opening are exactly the conditions the researchers identified as shedding particles into the water. And finally, here is the answer nobody selling you anything will give you. A co-author of that Columbia study, an environmental chemist who spent months counting plastic particles in bottled water, responded to his own findings by increasing how much tap water he drinks. A good carbon filter and a glass or steel bottle will cost you less in a year than most families spend on bottled water in a month, and it eliminates the packaging problem entirely. In much of Europe, drinking tap water at the table is simply normal, and public confidence in it is high. Here, an entire industry was built on convincing you the faucet was suspect and then sold you the same municipal water back in a bottle that sheds plastic into it. The labels were built to earn your trust without earning it. Now you know how to see straight through them. If this changed how you think about what is in your water, passing it along to someone who buys these brands by the case is probably the most useful thing you can do today.